jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Lo and behold, I have another very talented puppeteer, comedian, and current TV show host. That is Emily Marsh from the new 13th season of Mystery Science Theater. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you so much. Another puppeteer? You have multiple puppeteers on the show?
Well, I interviewed Trace, Buyu, and Frank Conniff.
Of course. I was about to be like, oh man, I didn't realize there were so many of us that we were flooding the podcast waves.
It's a very specific, loaded intro. So there were many who wanted to ask you a shit ton of questions. I will try and summarize a bunch of them as needed.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so glad that there's specific questions I can answer, because sometimes I feel bad. I'm always like, do people care? Do people want to know?
People do, and it's really funny how, typically a lot of the people who are watching MST are also watching stuff like Joe Bob and Elvira and even Spinguli. So they're Camp City. They love all kinds of wacky, nutty movie knowledge and unusual live comedy shows and improv. So
Yes, I know. I love to say that MST3k. Well, I love that on one of the live shows that we did, I got to freak out someone who was like waiting outside the theater because I went, dude, you have a Red Dwarf shirt? That's awesome. I love Red Dwarf. And he looked more horrified.
It is wild. You don't know what you're going to get from fans. Had you been to conventions prior to this being part of a giant fandom?
You know what's so funny is that, because puppets by themselves are kind of like another weird niche group. I'll be honest, I'm one of those people, one of those actors who did that horrible thing where I basically worked 24/7.
Oh, wow.
So unfortunately, even the idea of like taking vacations or going to conventions was sort of like an alien concept to me. Cause I'm like, but that's things you do with time off. I don't have time off.
And in all fairness, if you can't afford it, then it's going to be even more miserable. You're like, oh.
Like, actually, I was working in Atlanta and was like working on a TV show down there doing puppets, and Dragon Con was happening like that weekend.
Big one.
I was like, oh man, I have to go. But I remember just being like, oh no, like I should be working on some other stuff over the weekend. And now that all of that was taken away from us from basically 2 years, that's definitely number one on my list is like, I gotta go to Dragon Con. No more putting it off. The universe has shown me.
Nice. Who was there at that recent gathering?
Oh man, who was there? Felt like it basically everyone.
Everyone.
It was like everyone was there. I think even there were Mystery Science Theater people who were there because Joel's been there a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
And what's funny is I actually knew what Dragon Con was because they would just so often go there. He would go there, Joel would go there, Kevin Murphy or Trace or Bill would go there, and yeah, even the new guys. So it's just like Jonah was definitely going there.
Oh yeah, and all the puppet slams too. That's how because I was working at the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta, then was doing the puppet show, a small little TV show called Moon and Me, which is the creator of Teletubbies, decided to go the opposite direction, and he made a quiet show that was supposed to put kids to sleep, and the puppets were obnoxiously tiny. I think the tiniest puppet was 3 centimeters tall. And
I saw that on there. I meant to ask you what that was.
oh my gosh, it was a beautiful, gorgeous nightmare of a project in terms of like being a performer on it, because there's nothing more insane than being a 3 centimeter tall puppet in a close up and ants start crawling on the puppet and it looks like an alien from outer space is like taking over this space. So we'd have to hold for ants all the time. So I was doing that, and puppet slams are huge in Atlanta and are really big at Dragon Con. There's like an after hours like puppet slam that I was like, a bunch of my friends were performing in, and I was like, oh man, I gotta go. So it's all being added to the list for all the people listening out there. I need to go to conventions. I've learned my lesson. So.
Oh, good. We're not here for snobbery, but. So I saw that you were trained in the, you're originally based in DC, Washington, Washington, DC. Why am I saying that the wrong way? And
the district
and Sesame Street Puppetry Workshop was part of your training. What was that like? Just a little backstory for that.
Oh man. So the way the Sesame Workshop worked, that was one of the times where I was working at the Center for Puppetry Arts doing 2 shows down there. And then essentially what the Sesame Workshop is they usually put out a call to basically anyone who wants to send in an audition tape, and you get the chance to, for 3 days, in my case, to basically train with like Sesame Street puppeteers. So like Peter Linz is there, Matt Vogel, who does Kermit now, was there. And so, oh, go ahead.
Very sweet. Very cool.
Oh yeah, very sweet, very cool, also terrifying.
Yeah,
because you basically get up there and the most terrifying part of it is like the first day they essentially wanted to make sure. So fun fact for anybody who doesn't know, the small niche world of on-camera puppetry is basically the hardest thing right off the bat to get is that when you do on-screen puppetry, they don't flip the monitors. The monitor you're looking at when you're puppeteering isn't a mirror image. It's basically a true image, unflipped. So whatever you do on camera, you're going to see the opposite happening on the monitor.
Man.
And so that's always like the biggest bar to entry when it comes to on-screen puppetry, because if you don't know that when you make a video to send into the workshop, you'll get in there and the first thing they have you do is walk on camera, say, hi, my name is Emily with the puppet, and then you walk off. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that that they had a flipped monitor. So you saw people walk on camera in front of Matt Vogel and Peter Linz, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even stand upright because I'm not used to seeing it that way.
You got to flip the video before you even submit it.
Exactly. And so there was like a first almost weeding out process. It was like, okay, cool. Like these people just have to go work on monitor. And then there were those who were left. And I was in that group of those who were left. And basically the rest of the time was sort of like, all right, what other crazy challenges can we throw at you to see how well you do in front of a group of your peers? So it was like wonderful, amazing, also so stressful. Because you obviously like want to do your best in front of an audience of like Marty Robinson. But it was incredible. The thing I wish about that whole experience was that we had more time to do it, because how often do you get to be in a Sesame Street studio practicing with 3 cameras, like switching between cameras sitcom style with a puppet? So cool, so technical, but like I said, so terrifying.
That's so wild, yeah. So this was around the 2000s, 2010s when you got into this, or?
That was around into puppetry. I got into puppetry my last year of college, which would have been 2013. And basically the impotence for even going into puppetry at all was basically just totally getting burnt out from theater school. Because anybody who's had the fun time of going to theater school is, I think around the time when you graduate, you start having that conversation where people go, yeah, you look like blah, 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 so you'll play that. And
yes.
I remember being like, so I think just reaching a breaking point where I was like, man, I'm so frustrated with that. Like I can do so much more than how I look. And around that time, I'd done Avenue Q at school and thought, this is such a cool medium. Like, you can be anything. And then our grad student had recommended there was this very small puppet touring company out of Cincinnati called MadCap Puppets. And so I just totally on a whim basically auditioned for them because I was like, yeah, I want to try something new. I don't want my face to be in this like whole agenda of what I can do. Like, I want to go play with dolls and make weird faces and weird voices. And so I got cast with them, and that basically started, because I think puppetry is one of those things where UConn technically has a program, but for the most part, the only way you're going to learn how to do puppetry is if you have a job in it, and then they train you on the job. So as soon as you've gotten one job in puppetry, it kind of, or at least in my life, because I've been super lucky, it sort of has been like a domino effect where it's, oh, you have puppetry experience? Oh, you should totally audition for our show. Oh, now you've done 2 jobs. Okay, great. Now you're qualified to do these things. And it's been cool that all of like the experience has basically been, well, a lot of my early theater experience was old puppet dudes telling me I was doing it wrong and basically being like, keep your arm up. If it's hurting, you know you're doing it right.
Wow.
Basically doing a lot of cafetorium shows. That was my primary medium from, I think, about 2013 to maybe around like 2017, 16.
Starting off small before going big. That is so cool how you revealed that, because I've had many pals who were in theater. I did some theater in college, and I totally understand the whole how it can be cutthroat, it can be competitive, it can even be just a lot of entertainment followed by tons of boredom, just depending on who's prepping what kind of show's going on. And it's a shame that how, like you say, is like half the time when people are hiring you, they're hiring you because you have a certain look versus whether they're actually impressed by whatever accent or dancing style or just acting preference you displayed. So
Yeah, it's like a ton of things that you have like no control over.
no.
You can't like go home and be like, I'm going to stare in the mirror and make myself look like the thing I want to look like. It's like that. So that's nice about puppetry. Everything is like within your control for the most part. I'm like, oh, I get it. I didn't get that job because I don't have the proficiency in that skill. Like, that's so much easier to swallow and then work on, rather than be like, oh, I didn't look like how they wanted this imaginary character to look like. Okay, I guess I'll go work on that. Like,
Right. What does that even mean? That's not constructive. So
right.
So who were your mentors, let alone the people who gave you the passion to get into acting and puppetry?
Oh, wow. So actually, I had one mentor. This whole obsession with theater definitely started. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, or if you can. I definitely was one of those people who was the quietest kid up until
I was totally the quiet kid until acting was in there.
Exactly. It's like there's a place where somebody says like, hey, you can be as loud as you want to be.
You wanted it for college, and then when you're at the actual thing, then you're going to use all your energy just to get into whatever character you want to bring to life. So.
Exactly. And so that was basically my story, is like being so shy and like very withdrawn. And then for some reason, I don't even remember why, but in 3rd grade, auditioning for just like a little after school program that was doing like Shakespeare scenes. And for some reason, I do remember I auditioned with the poem, I'm being eaten by a boa constrictor.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what it was, but for some reason I was like, oh no, this is a medium where like I can be as loud and ridiculous as I want, and this is allowed. And and it was just so funny that the teacher from that little after school 3rd grade program, her name was Elizabeth. Oh my gosh, what was her last name?
I wasn't there.
Elizabeth Kahn. And she was a mentor. Like, she was still a part of my life from that 3rd grade all the way until, unfortunately, she passed away a couple years ago from cancer.
Oh dear.
But up until that point, like from that first bite, had been a part of it, a part of my life since then, kind of always being a support through auditioning for college, and the kind of person you invite to like, hey, my first professional gig, like, come see me do this thing. So she definitely was a big influence from the beginning. And I would say somebody else who has been a mentor, he's going to be so embarrassed that I said this, because every time I keep telling him, I'm like, I'm sorry, Raymond, you're my mentor. I just have to give you the credit. And he's like, no, don't be weird about it. But a friend, mentor in puppetry, Raymond Carr, who's out of Atlanta, an amazing builder, puppeteer, doing his own projects. He just released a short trailer for the premise is if kids in the hood found an alien ship and started piloting it around Atlanta. And that's the premise.
Is that Science Team, the movie that just came out?
Oh my gosh, no, it's not Science Team, but we can talk about Science
I'd
Team.
love to. It's on Amazon Prime for those who want to see it. And I can kind of see how you got, did the MST3k crew see that and that's how you got their gig?
Oh no, Cam, this is a big secret. I'm very excited that people have found out that I was a part of Science Team.
Okay.
I think Joel has no idea.
Okay. It's like the first one that comes up on your resume, so I'm just saying.
I know. Well, I think when I go into audition, it's under my film, but to be honest, it was something I did right out of college. It's this small production company that was in Richmond, Virginia. And my part isn't the biggest in it. I think it was honestly something to do over the summer. I'll be honest, Cam, I don't think I even got paid money to do that. I don't remember being paid anything to be a part of that movie.
Make your mark wherever it is in whatever movie.
It's true. It's so true. And it was something, it's something to do. And then now it's come back, or maybe never gone away, because now it's on Amazon Prime. And they were actually reached out because they're maybe re-releasing a re-edited version of it. Because I think some things didn't age well in that movie. I haven't watched it in a while, but
well, it is a sci-fi horror, and typically there is going to be something where someone gets attacked or someone's a psycho. So
it's true. No,
it did win the Scaricon nomination, so at that festival, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the production values on it were really great. It's exactly who you wanted to be hanging out with on a horror sci-fi movie. Everybody was there because they loved it. They were just older dudes who looked like they lived in their mom's basements. They were we're gonna set something on fire.
That's amazing.
And I'll always be super happy because spoilers, in that movie I do shoot the main character.
Yeah.
And
just let it out of the bag. Emily kills someone.
I do shoot somebody. And the funny thing is they did let me come up with my own kill line.
Oh, that is badass.
Everyone
has to make their own one-liner.
And honestly, that was enough payment for that movie. The fact that I got to have a scene where I had a gun, I shot the crazy guy, because they said on purpose, they were like, we want the men in this movie to be out of control, and you're the sane woman who ultimately has to put him down. And I was like, well,
movie,
this is
guys.
awesome.
Yeah.
This is awesome. And so, yeah, they had a kill line for me. And I remember being like, oh, it's kind of fine. And they were like, yeah, if you throw in something you want to say, go right ahead. And I was like, okay, let me give this a try. I don't know. Are you allowed to curse on your podcast? I can't remember.
Say again.
Am I allowed to curse on your podcast?
Yeah. Always. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I should
cool.
have clarified.
So basically in this movie, the through line is that the main character has a weird mommy complex.
Okay.
So he turns to me and he says, "Mommy." And so my idea for the kill line, I don't even know how I came up with this in the moment. It was just total impulse. But my kill line was, "It's fucking past your bedtime, bitch." And then shoot him in the head. It's actually, that scene is still in my reel. And I recently had somebody, because I was, when you start to I don't know, have to become a big deal, or you're trying to market yourself, or all of the other stuff that I do hate about this industry. Somebody was advising, she was like, well, maybe you should take that scene out of your reel. And I was like, no.
That's all I got right now. And plus,
I'm like, yeah. No, for personal reasons, it stays in.
I've noticed that a lot. And I've even noticed that with a lot of the ones that are raising all these actors who are in faith-only productions, and I don't understand it. It's just people want to see what you can do, and you're going to eventually get a role that has some level of cursing or is kind of edgy. So why does that matter?
Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes there's always like in this industry, people always tell you like the right way to do things.
They've
Like
been doing it endless amount of times, so therefore it must be right, even though it's never been proven.
right. And then something that I've also found to be true is like, yeah, you should follow the rules like 75% of the time. But
Mhm.
25% of the time, it's like if you go with your gut, if there's something you feel strongly about, that usually sets you apart and ends up like helping you in the long run anyway. So anyway, that's how I feel about that scene in my reels. I'm like,
Oh, very
that's
well
just
said.
me. I'm proud of it. So if you don't like that scene being in my reel, we probably aren't meant to work together. So it works out.
Mhm. Same thing with directors following scripts. Is like you can always rewrite it. You don't have to go by just the script unless you're clearly under a, you know, giant eye by the producer on a TV show who says you can't do anything.
Right, 100%. Or like a commercial where you're like, okay, I get it. It's the copy. 10 Stooges have looked at this copy. So I guess I have to say it this way.
Right. Are there 10 Stooges that you've worked with?
Only on commercials.
Okay,
Only
so
on
there you
commercials.
go. That's a pretty good run compared to 200 Stooges who drive you crazy.
That's true. That is very true.
So I saw that again. You were many skills that you listed. You do many different dialects as well as can play the violin. How did those come into play?
Oh, so well, dialects. The nice thing about dialects is I went to theater school, Cam.
Yes.
Theater. We dressed in all black for our classes. You know, we were very serious. It's a BFA program. No messing around. No, it was honestly totally something that I feel like the teachers were like, how do we seem more professional like Harvard? Let's make them all wear black. That's what professionals do. I went to a state school, VCU, which I did very much appreciate going to, but I do think that theater departments tend to put on airs to like seem more impressive than they are.
Mhm.
So we learned dialects when we were at our BFA program. So that's where all of those came from, was my well-rounded theater education, where I took movement class, voice and speech class, and acting class.
Stellar.
Which I always love when people are like, I'm like, yeah, I got a 4.0 from my college in stretching. Let's be honest, that was a lot of what I was doing in theater school.
Stellar. I saw you also listed stick shift driving as a guy who's been a former valet. Is that what you did?
Oh, well, that had to do with my father being like, I'm sorry, no child of mine can't know how to drive stick shift. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Even though I begged him not to teach me, I was like, I don't care. I don't want to learn. And he was like, nope, we're going to the parking lot. You're going to stall out, but you're going to learn. And now I'm eternally grateful that he made me do that and dragged me to do that kicking and screaming. And actually, that's a similar story with the violin playing. Because at a young age, my dad went into more normal sciences like computer science and stuff like that, but originally had actually been a French horn player in college.
Oh, okay.
So as a result, he's wonderful, so supportive, one who got me into Mystery Science Theater, but he will after shows be like, oh yeah, you did it better before, but yeah, it was good. You're like,
Stellar.
okay, the critique, got it. And so with the violin playing, that was something where at a young age, I was, like most girls at a young age, was reading Little House on the Prairie, and Pa fiddle plays in the books. And so in passing, as you do when you're just a kid, is like, hey, Dad, I want to learn how to play violin. And then cut to 10 years of basically him forcing me to practice, forcing me to continue with violin playing. Because he was like, you made a commitment. I also think it's, the well-rounded education. He loved playing instruments. He wanted to impart that on me and my brother. We both played violin. But it was so funny that the violin playing totally came from a half followed through desire to be like, oh, I want to fiddle play like Pa in the book. It seems fun. And then cut to, no, Dad, I don't want to do that piece again. Like, no, I don't want to play with the metronome again. But I am also, similar to stick shift driving, very grateful that I was dragged kicking and screaming to now learn that I now know how to play violin. Not as well as I should be, but I can indeed squeak out a tune.
That's stellar, and I know what you mean. Where it's just like nothing seems fun at the time, but eventually, it's just some kind of connection. It makes you wonder how many. Well, would you say some people even saw that on your resume at the time? You're like, okay, that's why I got it. Versus,
well, it is so funny that like I think all we've been talking about is my resume, and it's amazing how the list of things you can do on a page, and then basically each one has essentially a crazy story behind it.
oh, totally, absolutely, and more or less, just in your bio, you're like, I performed for the Timberlake and Jessica Biel family. I'm like, okay, nice. How did that even come about?
Oh man, that's another crazy story. Hey, to any kids out there listening, if you want to become a puppeteer, you're going to go crazy places. It's going to take you crazy, crazy adventures, such as working for the Swedish Cottage Marionette Theater in New York City, which is the only puppeteering gig where you're technically a Parks and Rec employee of New York City. And so one day, so technically I have performed for Jessica Biel and Justin Timberlake because they came to the Swedish Cottage with their kid to watch the show. The lame part of that story that I don't mention is that when you puppeteer marionettes, you're up on a bridge. So the audience cannot see you at all.
Mhm.
So this whole performance, we're basically running back and forth being like, do it for Justin, do it for Jessica. And we're like, just having more fun than usual. Come down to take our bows. They've left early. And they came in late and they left early. So I never saw them, never met them, had no interactions with them, but very technically, they saw
Still a
me
funny story.
dangle a piece of wood on a string. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and I'll always make it sound better in the bio. Yeah, I've performed for Jessica Biel and Justin Timberlake.
Hey.
Let's not go into the details of it. It's
Mhm.
could bore you.
Absolutely. And this comes from Pete Quint of Good Beer Bad Movie Night. So brace for impact. This is a pretty stupid
Okay.
question.
I'm so excited.
I'm gonna reword it a bit. So, did you ever consider like performing in the circus and maybe just even doing various acts like jumping through fire or doing juggling acts?
What's the sad thing with a question like this? And I'm sure a bunch of other friends of mine did consider auditioning for Cirque du Soleil because they actually do hire puppeteers. That is something that they occasionally hire, but you need to have other skills
Yes.
like the ones you've listed. And I remember for 2 seconds actually considering, I was like, okay, so how much work would I have to do to come up with like a circus trick that I could do, like blowing fire or doing some sort of like, I don't know, gymnastics or contortion or something like
Can
that.
run away from a tiger or a bull in
Right.
5 minutes.
And I think it went as far as like one YouTube video. And I was like, I can't do this. This is too much work. I've already got too many random skills on my resume.
Were you very athletic in school, or were you just like, hey, I'm an average Joe. I'm not going to bother with it.
Okay, I'll be honest. So I've played soccer, but I was that kid. I don't know if anybody is Arrested Development fans, but
Oh, yeah.
that recurring joke with George Michael where anytime anyone throws a ball at him, he just ducks. That was 100% me every time in gym, in like the gymnasium. Like anybody would throw a basketball and I would immediately go fetal. Which
That's
I credit
awesome.
as I once was on a softball team very young and got a softball to the face, like directly to the face. So to be fair, the instinct is left over from a traumatic event. But yeah, I was 100% George Michael when it comes to any sort of like
Jeez.
any kind of physical sport or ability.
Yeah, I thought dodgeball was violent enough. My God.
I know, and softballs, that's a big ball. I mean, I know baseballs are technically more lethal, but it was like the fastest pitcher in the league too.
Nice, very nice. So a follow-up question, and warning, this is just so out there random. Do you prefer plain or peanut M&Ms? I don't know why he asked this.
What a great question. And I do have strong opinions on this. So I'm so glad somebody asked.
I had no idea this was a thing, but apparently it's a trend. It's kind of like, I don't know, innie or an outie or just...
I'm going to cause ripples in the community. I'm going to say plain because hear me out. It's similar to my argument about savory versus sweet breakfast foods is an M&M. When you have it with a peanut in there, you need like a glass of water right next to you. That dries out your mouth so quickly. So in terms of if I have a choice between peanut M&Ms or regular M&Ms, I'm going regular M&Ms. And you can eat more of them too. The peanuts are just like filling up in your stomach. That's extra space that could be for chocolatey delight. So
Nice. Very nice. And so just going back a little bit, we pretty much covered most of the bases on your extraordinary talents and hysterical upbringing. So what got your foot in the door for this show? That is MST3k.
yeah, so basically it was the luckiest chance of my life, essentially, which is frightening to think about sometimes because you think about things that have changed your life, and that one audition basically changing my life so much is something I'm so glad I didn't know retrospectively, like going into that audition, like no pressure, but this could change your life. So I had just seen on Playbill, which is where they list a lot of the auditions in New York, someone had sent it along and been like, hey, you're a singing puppeteer. This audition would probably be perfect for you. And I look, and it's Mystery Science Theater 3000 Live. And I was like, holy crap, this is fucking crazy. Mystery Science Theater is doing a live tour and they're having auditions. And it's for a singing puppeteer, two random talents that I have. Like, oh my gosh, I've got to have a shoe-in for this. So of course I was like super obnoxious when I sent in the email and I was like, hi, my name is Emily Marsh. I'm very excited to audition for this project. I'm a puppeteer and a singer, and my favorite episode is Attack of the Killer Shrews. Would love the chance to audition. I was like, how can I prove that I know what you are? And I'm very excited.
They've probably got a 5,000 auditions saying Space Mutiny or Hog Goblins for the win. Oh.
Well, you'd be surprised, Cam, how I think because so it was a musical theater casting director. I don't think it was in the comedy circles. So as a result, I was so surprised when I went to go audition. It was actually, I was getting really mad before I was going in the room because there was a bunch of people there who were like, so have you heard of this Mystery Science Theater thing? Yeah, my agent just sent me here. And I was like, are you kidding me? You didn't even take the 2 seconds to look up what this was before you came? Like, whatever. There are people who don't know what Mystery Science Theater is. They wouldn't have taken
it seriously anyway. I have to watch bad movies maybe 5 dozen times. Oh, out.
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, a 2-hour-long episode. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's with commercials. Like, come on, it's an hour and a half. So in a way that was like, I think slightly making me feel more confident because I was like, come on, I know this show. Like, I know this. And here's a bunch of like people who are here who don't even know what it is. So I went into the audition and you needed to prepare. It was impressions, which I will be the first to say, impressions are not my strong suit. Like when we were assigning lines in this, for this MST3k live tour, I definitely went out of my way to be like, oh, it's an impression. I'll give that to Nate. Oh, it's singing. Most of the time I give that to Connor. This is me confessing on the record that I do not think my impressions are good. But we had to do impressions. And basically my only impression that I felt super confident about was singing like Cyndi Lauper.
Oh, nice.
So that was my main one that I was like, okay, well, I know that's good. And I did do a Bob Dylan impression. And yes, I am very embarrassed about what I did in that room. And then we had to sing and then do a monologue. And so Joel was behind the table, which was super unusual because usually creatives aren't in the room for the first audition.
Just see the tape the next day or some shit.
Exactly, yeah. But he was there. And so that was kind of startling. But so at the end of my audition, similar to that kill line, I don't know quite why I said this, but this was telling a true story of what had happened. Is at the end of the audition, I was like, Joel, I just want to say, like, I love this show. Like, I've watched it with my dad growing up and my brother. But I got to be honest, my mom, on the other hand, her reaction when I got this audition was, really? That show got a national tour?
Thanks, Mom.
so earnestly. She said that so earnestly because she, on the record, does not care for the show. And so Joel and everybody behind the table just cracked up. And so I leave and then get called back. And so for the callback, we had to do actually like riffing with video, which was so cool. That was like the first taste of it. And it was so fun to finally do what you've watched for so long, especially with such accuracy. It was so fun. I'll never forget that. And at the end of that audition, that callback, we once again had like one-on-ones. And Joel mentioned, he was like, I just thought that was so funny. Like what you said about your mom and like what she said about the show, that was just really cracking me up, man. And so in that moment, I said, Joel, well, now I have to be honest with you. Actually, my mom said, how did that stupid show get a national tour? And
close enough.
Kills it again. Really, I honestly could not have planned it better. And I did it with no planning at all. And I really, to this day, think that is exactly why I'm here with Mystery Science Theater 3000, is telling Joel to his face that my mom thought it was a stupid show. And he always brought it up. I think what always tickled him so much was he was like, what if I'd been like pissed that you said my show was stupid to my face? Like that somebody thought that. And I think it's similar to like that scene being in my reel. It's like the same lesson. It's like, well, then honestly, we wouldn't have been a good match personality wise. Like I wouldn't have been a good match for this tour or this show in general. But I mean, you know, as it goes to show, it's like, which honestly, it figures. Like Mystery Science Theater has that amazing thing of, it's such a great show, but it never takes itself too seriously.
You said it years ago, the right people get it. Did you have that problem growing up? Because I noticed as a fan, half the time, you could tell who was willing to give you the minute of a time, explaining what it was. And if you didn't catch him within like the first like paragraph of talking to him, he's like, oh, I lost him. They don't know what I'm talking about. They just think I'm weird.
100%. And that horrible nerd feeling where you're sharing it with somebody and you're laughing, but you're more watching them not laugh.
Yeah, which is just toxic. It's just like
100%. So you get like half an hour and you're like, you know, I mean, we can stop if you don't think it's funny. Actually, Matt McGinnis, who works at Alta Universal, said the ultimate horrible viewing experience is he shared an MST3k episode that he worked on in Jonah's episodes with his stepdad, and it was Mac and me. And at the end of the episode, his mom was like, you know, I really liked that. And he was like, oh, Mom, that's so nice. And she goes, no, not the commentary. I really liked that movie. That was a good movie. I was like, oh, that's the worst.
Thanks.
That's wild.
Oh, she probably worked for McDonald's.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Oh, heavily product placement going on in that movie.
Oh, I'm sure that whoever's in charge of it now is like, guess what? We're not the Mac and Me McDonald's anymore.
That was a different era, even though they should take full credit for that. I think it's now come around so much that that movie should be played. I mean, I was showing that movie, the clips of all of the Paul Rudd interviews when he kept playing that clip over and over again on Conan. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've been playing that for friends for years because that was so hilarious. And always thinking, I was like, yeah, that movie's crazy. I got to get around to watching that sometime. And then cut to Mystery Science Theater doing it. It was like, yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was also wondering if, you know, like both theater and comedy talents, if you were even thinking of trying out for like one of those clubs where you can sign up to try and perform and hopefully get invited to do a stand-up set on one of the talk shows.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's the funny thing is that coming to Mystery Science Theater from Puppet World, I think there is so many traditional things that you would do if you were coming from a comedy background. Like I've actually felt like very self-conscious about it. Like getting to write on this last season was so amazing, so awesome. I had imposter syndrome, like up to my ears. Cause we had like comedy writers on there that were on like the Daily Show and stuff, because I mean, basically Mystery Science Theater just has such pull within the comedy circles that of course everybody wants to be a part of this. So but I really never thought I would have a career in comedy. Or any kind of face acting. I was just like, yeah, that stuff will come up if it comes up, but I'm mostly doing puppeteering. Like I'm trying to be a TV and film puppeteer. And so then now to have all of these amazing experiences like just dropped in my lap, it's once again, most wonderful, most terrifying to be like pitching jokes to Joel. And you're like, how did I come to this? I feel like I should have been more prepared. I should have like taken classes, like improv classes. What's going on? So I wasn't one of those people, only because I didn't expect to be here. I didn't think I was talented enough in comedy to end up being in this situation.
It also helped that, unlike, with, Mike was just the writer and then, took over and had shoes to fill. Jonah joked even before this. I might be the Christopher Eccleston equivalent of the Doctor Who community, where and people just want to say, well, he's not as he's not as good as Joel or Mike. So you fortunately I did notice you did make a huge impression because you got to be on the live tours and the online specials. So everyone was already pretty much dialed up, ready to accept you as the new star of the fandom.
Which is amazing, because honestly, I'll always be the person who does like a take to the camera and be like, really, this is working? Joel, you're sure about this, right? Like this really should be happening, right? Like almost, I've been telling this tour is almost my imposter syndrome, the tour, where I'm still kind of like wrapping my brain around how it all happened, just because it went from being, I was part of the live tour. I expected to be a puppeteer, and then I was a face character. And early on in the live show, it was teased that it was, oh, and then this is the next host. And I remember always being like, well, what does that mean? I was definitely, there was a lot of it where I never want to assume, you don't want to be like, yeah, this is mine now. It was just like, oh no, I'm so happy to be here and on the tour and just getting to hang out. And then slowly, as more and more stuff happens, you go like, well, obviously this would be amazing, but I think it's just because I'm a pessimist the whole time. If you're a pessimist, then you can never be disappointed. So I've held true to that through so much of my life. So I'm like, oh, like we're doing live events, like, but we'll see. I mean, no promises have been made. It's fine. Like, I'm just so happy to be doing what I'm doing. And then cut to, I think the moment where it sort of became real was the patches. When I saw the patch with my face on it. Yeah. And then I started having like a weird feeling in my like heart. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really happening. This is really what's going to happen. But it truly was a huge endorsement to Joel, I guess, that basically he thought I could be a part of this. Cause I'd be the first person to say like, who is this? Who am I to be a part of this? But, all you can do is be just super grateful and just I've had fun. And this is like the nerd dream of a lifetime to be a part of it. So the fact that people have been not what I expected, which is to be like, who is this chick? But have actually like reached out and been like, no, you're doing a great job. It's like been, I don't know, it's been unbelievable. I get always so verklempt talking about it because I feel like I am so undeserving to be here. And then people have been so kind that it's, it's amazing. Still getting used to it every day.
Stellar. And would you care to even define the experience currently just with rewatching it? Are you guys still doing the typical someone takes notes while you guys make your own notes while you're reacting naturally to it?
Oh, to the movie?
Yeah.
Oh, so oh, so like the actual writing process? Sorry, I want to make sure I'm commenting on the right thing.
So usually I know writing comes afterwards. Is that still the case, or?
Oh, with watching the movie. So basically the process of, and I apologize, I needed to clarify only because it was so amazing. This summer we got to write on season 13 as well as write on this live show. So I think all together I got to write on 5 movies. And
Sweet.
So, which was awesome. And the thing that's been different than other seasons is that typically this actually was a private writing process. So everybody would watch the movie on their own, write down their jokes, and put them into kind of a giant Excel sheet for the head writers, Matt McGinnis, Elliot, and Joel, to kind of all take a look at and decide what was the best for each moment of the movie.
It makes you wonder if basically, Joel, it's second nature. Elliot, he's already reviewed plenty of clips for The Daily Show. And was this kind of a new experience for you, or was that kind of already kind of part of your comedy background, just no different than rewatching YouTube clips and being like, why do I find this funny or not funny?
Well, I definitely have had a lot of experience of, doing the true version of MST3k, which is just you're watching. I've always loved watching bad movies with friends and making them watch bad movies and then just yelling over the whole thing, yelling commentary. So I definitely had the real life experience of doing that. In a comedy setting, I had not. And what was really great was that this time around actually was different than that. We actually had Zoom writing rooms that we were in, and we would go through the clips together. And that was really helpful, especially for someone like me who was new to being in a writer's room. And I think overall is going to be really helpful for this new season, because we got to almost use not only our individual sense of comedy, but sort of our combined forces. So I loved having moments where somebody they'd say, well, I don't have a fully formed idea, but that banana in the right corner of the screen, like, isn't that so weird? And everybody gets to go, yeah, it really is. Like, what is going on there? And then everybody starts like throwing in their ideas, building on each other. Or in this upcoming season, there happen to be a lot of underwater sequences in movies, which are terrible because you can see the count in the corner, which tells you, oh, there's 2 minutes of silence while we watch a underwater sequence. That is not that interesting. And there's nothing more bleak than to drop that on a group of writers. Like our head writer, Tim, would always say, he's like, all righty, guys, so we're going to have to fill 2 minutes of silence with this underwater sequence. Like, what do people have? And there was one day in particular I remember where we just started, there was almost like a mental rebellion, and all of the writers just started throwing in their best ocean puns. It was just, I think it fits the show so well. It's just everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible to watch. Ocean pun, ocean pun, ocean pun. Oh, ocean pun. Okay, that's enough, guys. We need to stop.
Pretty wild, pretty wild. And I can't wait to see which movie this is. That
I know. Actually, it's the one I'm actually the most excited to see happen. I mean, I'm excited to see all of them happen, even the ones I've recorded, because I honestly do not remember most of what we did.
It's all a blur.
It really was, because we worked at such a fast pace. And sometimes we only got to do like a riff through of the movie twice, if not once. Like we do the whole segment in one go, and then it would be pickups. So most of those things we only got to really look at once. And now we've done Making Contact like 45 times. I think we're on our 45th show. So now this show is just so ingrained in my brain. And I keep thinking back to those episodes that we filmed in Philly, trying to remember some of the moments, even though there are some moments that definitely have stuck with me. And I am particularly excited to see, like, not to give too much away, I'll be vague, but there's a Beastie Boys-esque rap that we got to do, and I am very excited to see how it turned out.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun doing it, and everything had to be in one take, so it was very hectic, and I'm excited to see how that translates to the episode.
In all fairness, though, I mean, you're in the silhouettes, so not everyone has to, see that you guys are, ready to look at the notes and everything. And
That's true. Well, this actually was a host segment. So,
oh man, okay.
So and there was like a costume change mid-scene, and so I felt so bad because I was we got it in one take, and then we needed a backup, and I kept messing up every time with the Beastie Boys rap, and I was getting so flustered because we needed to. It was all my fault essentially that we couldn't move on from the scene, and they're just putting me back in costumes, and finally we got a second take that was also a good one to have as a backup, but that was at the same time so much fun and then so terrifying, and then oh thank goodness we did it. I didn't keep holding us up, but I'm very excited to see how that turned out. Hopefully they use the first take. That's my hope.
Nice. Very cool. So, you know, they did a pretty cool selection, much like they did with the second year on Netflix, the gauntlet of just displaying what movies were going to be airing, you know, so everyone got to anticipate, you know, how each episode was going to be. I take it you guys even got stuff that you're prepping for the inevitable, you know, future years.
Yeah, that is, I believe, the scuttlebutt. And I wish I actually knew more, because the way that this all led up was essentially we did our episodes. And then from that hotel in Philly, we were then driven to York, Pennsylvania to start rehearsing for Making Contact. So I think we only had about a day off in between those two processes. So we've been jokingly saying in like VIP meet and greets that we're like, hey, we'll tell you what we know about season 13, but actually, backers, you probably know more than us right now because we've been away from HQ for so long. So let us know if you know any updates. But I definitely know that the hope is that, you know, depending on how everything goes with season 13, that the hope is that we will continue doing this. So fingers crossed.
Totally. And the fact that you guys got your own network and all the episodes are, or at least most of them that, you know, are licensed, can be played on there. It's a pretty cool opportunity.
Yes, 100%. That it's now all going to be inside, like all changer.
Totally. And this is going to be like on the official site, and it'll be an app as well, or is it? I misread.
Yeah, that also might honestly have to be one of the things where I also say they haven't told me yet.
No, all good. I got only a gist of it, but it was just cool to know. I was like, okay, coming out sometime this year. Pretty damn cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they have the developers on their side making this stuff. And I know at the very least, you know, there will be some official site where all of these things will be broadcast. And I think there's so many more plans in the future that even if those things don't get dropped in March, they'll be coming down the bend. As far as I know, since I wasn't kicked out of HQ and on the road.
Plus, you know, the Gizmoplex forums are now a thing, and people are finding ways to stream episodes together, and it's just a very cool collective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And much like Star Trek, there's been a few toxic fans, but for the most part, it's been pretty damn cool. Just everyone's been pretty chill. So.
Yeah, 100%. That was something I was talking with someone about the fandom of MST3K. Actually, a couple times I've said this, which is it's such a gentle, sarcastic show, like, or just a feel-good show. Gentle isn't the right word. It's just such a feel-good, genuine kind of a show. And I think that as a result, what the show puts out is what it attracts. So you've got a fan base that is just so, for the most part, accepting and just genuinely there to have a good time. Like with the shows, especially when I was really scared before the first MST3K live show this tour, which I was terrified. To myself, the way that I mentally made it not a show, because it being a show was freaking me out. And so for that first tour show, and honestly, the ones after that too, I always thought of it as, you know what, all this is we've invited over like 400 of our closest friends to watch a bad movie and be silly and have a good time. And that's exactly what they're like. It's people are just so there to have a good time and get dressed up and just enjoy these movies. And it's just such a great fan base. I mean, everything has its toxic corners, but to be honest, I mean, MST3K is like, it really keeps those feel good, accepting vibes really, really well.
Because they've had to survive everything from filmmakers who are like, how dare you mock my movie, which isn't very good, or just, you know, 3 different networks who couldn't appreciate it. You know, Comedy Central killed it, Sci-Fi killed it, Netflix just killed it.
Absolutely. And it's not supposed to be this highbrow thing where it's like, ooh, I'm going to watch the MST3K episode and critique the technical values of each one. It always was like kind of loose. I mean, Joel even gave us the tour of where he went, the Salvation Army that he went to in Minneapolis, where he got the junk to build the bots out of. It's,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like
inside his head.
Oh man, that was so much fun. That was so cool. The Minneapolis driving tour with Joel was awesome. So much fun.
Stellar. And have you even encountered other peers who will often use this show to go to sleep? I notice that's kind of a trend.
Yeah, I've been using it myself on the bus, actually.
No, that's great because it makes sense. It was always often, shown after midnight. It was kind of the stay up late, and it was Adult Swim before it was a thing. So.
Yeah, it's true. And I think there's also something about having just running commentary just in the background. For me personally, when I fall asleep, it's nice to have, it's just like a very calm show for the most part, So when you're going to sleep, it's definitely nice to have just like some sort of background noise, especially when you're trying to fall asleep on a moving bus. That's been a lifesaver, is being able to watch these shows.
Sure. Any other side projects you want to promote as well?
Oh, let's see. Well, we already talked about Science Team. Check it out. Pay attention to the rating. My poor parents. It is, which is good. Yeah, I brought my poor parents to see it when they showed it in theaters, and I don't think they've ever quite forgiven me because it's not quite their bag. And let's see what else is coming up. It's been so much MST3k these past couple months.
Oh, good.
I think that's basically it. Check out the Gizmoplex when we come out in March.
All right, looking forward to it. And this episode, will air shortly, so keep in the loop.
Oh yeah, and the last couple shows of the live tour, we're about to be off the road as of February 6th, and I'm knocking on all the woods. We have not had to cancel because of COVID, and I 100% put that down to, once again, MST3K fans being like, we follow the rules and doing our part, and it's been super helpful. So a huge thanks to everybody for making that possible.
Absolutely. And thank you for making the time for this. And so glad to get to know my icon better.
Oh my gosh, no, it was such a pleasure to talk with you, Cam. It's been doing a lot of morning show interviews, and those are so much more terrifying and awful than just chatting with you on a podcast. It's like, the show.
This is radio you can edit,
Chat. Exactly.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, Prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was.
How
gonna be
did
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes of gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy. At eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zamenhof. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zamenhof, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zamenhof, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zamenhof.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
Hi there. It's Heather from the Watching Netflix Without You podcast. Did you know that there are over 1,200 Netflix original feature films and documentaries? And that number is only growing. So I've made it my mission to watch as many as I possibly can. Then, with a delightful guest or guests, disclaimer, more often than not my brother Ryan, we spend an episode rating, reviewing, and discussing a film at length. The first half of every episode is spoiler-free for those who haven't seen it yet, and in the second half, after a very clear spoiler warning, we dive into it. And that's really about it. You can listen to Watching Netflix Without You on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.